So this is the 21 signs you might be insane. Okay, let's fire right in there and get in with number 21. You use the word society excessively to make broad statements. You use that word to criticize or praise groups of others rather than speak in terms of individuals. So something I'm guilty of. I'm really trying to get out of the habit of it. But saying, "Oh, society is this way, society is that way," and you know, there really is no society. It's just this convenient term that you can use to justify any kind of an argument and say society needs this, society needs that, or society's broken. But really, you know, what am I really saying? Who knows? I mean, it's just a word, right?
Yeah, society basically limits the individual because it just makes up society as this big blob, and the blob thinks the same way, you know?
Right, like 5 people in my town go out and murder people separately, and you say, "Oh, society's broken," but it's really just 5 people who, you know, are probably broken, and we need to deal with those people, and not really all of society, making huge, broad laws to deal with all of society that everyone's subject to, instead of just looking at, wow, what are the causes of these individual cases?
Yeah, like some nut goes mad in a cinema or something, you know, with a gun, and it's society's relationship with guns, you know?
Absolutely.
Crazy stuff.
Okay, number 20. You think property prices should increase. This is something that's probably particularly sensitive to Irish people, who just imagine that, you know, and actually Americans too. I know Americans went through a similar property bubble, where, you know, everyone was talking about, wow, property prices can only go up, all this kind of thing. But it's still being reported in the papers as like a sign of economic health. Yeah. I'm really not too sure how that works, because, you know, you look at every other good that we want in society, everything gets cheaper. That's the way it's supposed to be. You know, we have new phones that can do, you know, like, look at, bring an iPhone. You know, 5 years ago, someone would look at you square if you could tell them what it can do now. And for you know, less than you would have been able to buy a Sega Mega Drive on day one. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's just it just gets cheaper in the marketplace. Computers get cheaper, but they get better. Everything gets better and cheaper. And I don't see why houses, you know, outside of some kind of crazy scarcity, you know, which obviously we don't have in Ireland, property prices should be really, I mean, way lower than what they are now. And we know there's all kinds of government policies that are keeping them up there to keep people happy. But saying that they should increase, and then saying that is a sign that we're on the right track. I mean, what?
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. I mean, I don't see, you know, it's kind of like tulip sellers in Amsterdam in the 1600s. You know, it's absolute nonsense. I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, as you've just said, like, anything really the government controls seems to get worse and go up in price, when anything on the free market gets cheaper and gets better in terms of its functionality and features. I mean, if you compare the computers that people were using 20 years ago to the computers we're using now, I mean, it's an incredible difference. Whereas you think of a school bus 20 years ago and a school bus now, it's probably the same one, but costs people more to use it.
It's the same bus, and it's far more expensive.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I mean, when we had a property boom here, I mean, that cycle, as we know, business cycles are created by the government. But the other thing is as well, like, there were lots of lost productivity and lost raw materials that could have gone into building much more important things than houses that nobody wanted. The only reason they wanted them was because they were going up in value.
Of course, and by artificially keeping prices high using law, you are diverting all of these things into, you know, because people go, oh wow, there's money to be made here, so they'll rush their resources in there, and then of course you're left with ghost estates all around the country where they're not making any money, at least on the marketplace, but they're actually more valuable to people with high prices not being lived in. So yes, property prices absolutely should go down like everything else, unless there's like some kind of crazy hurricane destroys a whole bunch of houses or something. But we don't have I mean, that's probably actually could be a good thing in Ireland right now.
Yeah, despite Paul Krugman's wildest dreams, we aren't going to have that type of stuff happen.
Okay, number 19. You stop at a red light even very, very late at night when you can see all the connected roads and there are no cars.
Yeah, this is conditioning. This is, you know, red light equals stop. You know, green light equals good. You know, we're like rats in a maze. I mean, I think I've said that, you know, when I went through Milan at 3 in the morning a few years ago, all the lights were set to amber, which was the first sign. I mean, I don't know whether the anarchists had taken over just, you know, in the middle of the night, but it seemed to be a good way of doing things.
Yeah, I'd like to, maybe take a moment. Anybody listening who might have been, who might have encountered at some point in their life when they were driving that lights broke down, and just, maybe be a little sensitive to their feelings, because obviously all absolute hell broke loose when they got to that crossroads and the lights were out. I mean, if anything, doesn't it make people more careful? A light gives you like this right, no matter what, that you can drive, and so people still have to kind of override that instinct to just say, "Oh, green light, go," because you still have to look around for people. Whereas if you had no light at all, you would just always be looking around for people. I understand. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've seen a better one the other day driving around Dublin with my brother, and you come to a crossroads, and each entryway to the crossroads, each of the 4 roads, all have stop signs.
Right.
All 4. So the idea is that you'll slow down, but nobody goes anywhere. Unbelievable.
You're all just kind of staring at each other, trying to negotiate.
This is deliberate. Yeah, this is deliberate.
Maybe they could play rock, paper, scissors or something.
So.
But yeah, I mean, it's, and again, there are cases where traffic lights are probably important. You have really, really busy areas and you use traffic lights to negotiate. Okay, this road gets 30 seconds, this road gets 30 seconds. That makes sense in really, really busy crossroads at certain times of day. But when you can clearly see, there are no cars. It's, with the exception of maybe some kind of camera they're watching, waiting for you, and some traffic warden trying to make a quick buck. Number 18, you yell at or punish your children if they disobey you. Here's my new favorite line. You command them rather than compete. And I just, this is in reference to rather than just doing everything that everything the way everyone has always done stuff. Let's just look at parenting, because I think a lot of what's wrong with the world, if not the real majority, is based on this kind of barbaric treatment of children that goes back, and it's kind of like the last remnant of slavery in the Western world. I mean, you have we had the last thing that we got rid of was kind of woman slavery. So you could like, if the woman's being unreasonable, you could just hit her, make her snap out of it, send her off, that, and it was okay. It wasn't legally sanctioned, but it wasn't illegal either. You couldn't really do anything about it if you were a woman. The kind of attitude that parents take towards children, so they're irrational. So we need to kind of force them around the place until they come to this rational understanding. And of course, if you're rational with children, you're teaching them. So if you command children, you're teaching them to command also. So if there is this multiple studies I've been studying over the last few weeks anyway. I'm nowhere near finished yet. I'm really into this, where we're seeing cases of when parents are kind of overbearing and really kind of forceful, and come to dinner now, do this, and all this kind of stuff. What happens is the child is immediately compliant, and then but they develop what you would call chronic defiance, where any kind of authority is just automatically disrespect, and this will be transferred to bosses when you go into work, and that kind of thing, and obviously property owners who are authority on their property, that kind of thing. So this is what you teach children when you command them and you punish them because they disobey you, or just even something as simple as come to dinner, we'd like to have dinner with you, and the kid just wants to stay on his phone or on his Xbox or whatever, instead of initiating and really intelligent and gripping conversation to get the child away, you're basically outlawing your competition. You're saying, I'm not even going to bother competing with his phone, with his Xbox, which obviously has a lot better content for him than I do. We're just going to sit at a table and stare at each other for a while because that's nice and traditional. Why don't you actually just come up with some fun stuff to do with your kid? Even maybe at the start of the day, say, what? I think we should have dinner later on. What do you think of that? I want to talk about this or that and the other. And you make plans like I would with you, Alec. I mean, Alec, let's go to dinner. And you're like, well, no, I that night I want to just be home, or I want to play on my Xbox, or I want to spend time with somebody else. I would say, no, Alec, no, you will come to dinner with me, or you will go to your room and you will be grounded for 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, It's threatening as well, and the amount of information that kids absorb is scary. A huge amount of information goes in, and if a lot of it's negative and attached to coercion and threat as well, that can't be a good thing. Then you'll have the ills of society.
You did it. You said society.
That's society.
Okay, so yeah, I don't want to spend. Obviously, that's a really, really big topic, and we probably should get into that for a full podcast. I'd really enjoy doing that. So let's move straight on to point 17. You trust people who offer free education for your children for 10 to 12 years, and it's also mandatory.
Yes, it's essentially propaganda has always been free. Brainwashing has always been free. I mean, but in this instance, like, we're having the government indoctrinate our children, future generations. But in actual fact, it's far from free when we think about it. It's in the papers because we're in back to school season. It's in all forms of media, but there is nothing free about education in this country.
Absolutely not. And I think if you were to approach somebody in Ireland, maybe even 80 years ago, and say, hey, you know what, we want to give your kid free education. We're going to now, aside from the fact that we're going to take money from you elsewhere to pay for it, we're going to call it free. We're going to donate the money we steal from you towards this education. But we're going to do it for about 10 to 12 years. You probably would have been shot on sight. Yeah. Because what in the world are you teaching? Why do you want to give my kid free education? Why do you want to teach them for 10 to 12 years? It certainly isn't the subjects. Because I went to school. Now I went to school as far as second year, which is, I think that's 14. 15. Right. I don't have a junior cert. I don't have a leaving cert. I got a job.
They're the most important exams of your life.
Right. I just heard they're phasing out the junior cert in 2 years? 2 years, 3 years. So that's finished. But okay, so all the people I went to school with, and including myself, I mean, we spent years learning Irish, learning history. I cannot speak Irish. I mean, we're talking years here. I do not remember any history whatsoever that I learned. Geography, forget it. I mean, I'm just not, all of the subjects that were supposedly, and of course they could say, well, you know what, Gary, you just weren't paying attention. But what about the other 29 kids in my class who I bump into and we have conversations and they're all pretty much on the same page. Now, I don't ask them in depth, what do you remember from school? But there's this implicit understanding we all know that we never had any of those moments that you get if you like you right now, Alec, you know what it's like when you pick up a book from somebody like Murray Rothbard or Mises or something, and you read. I mean, some of the stuff is really scholarly and can be quite intense. But you get to a point in it when you push through whatever, you get to a page and there's just this one sentence that would just jump out and make sense of like 7 years of your life. This stuff just starts coming together, and you have this eureka moment where it's like, oh my goodness.
Gareth, you're so right. I mean, you and me have both talked about this, probably not in podcasts, but I mean, for a while, I would describe most of our lives, we were like, quote unquote, normal people. And then, we both kind of went looking for answers in places like, Mises University, Mises.org. And I mean, I was just listening to Tom Wood's commencement address there from this year's one. And, he was even making the point, like, don't think any point we're making is too basic because, it's there for a reason. And to some people, it might completely enlighten them. I don't think any of us had a day in school like this because we were still looking for answers, And essentially that's worrying because we were still looking for the truth, so to speak.
Well, that's right. And the problem is that what happens, people, is... they get burned in school. A lot of people, now there's some kids who really, really excel in school. Yeah. These are just natural geniuses and they would excel anyway, no matter where you put them. They don't need school, first of all. I think that's what's important. These are people who just consume books and they're just smart folks. But they're a very, very small minority. And
but that's data processing, that like, I mean, if we look at intelligence in terms of like, if you judge a fish on how it climbs a tree, clearly it's not a genius.
Well, right, yeah. I mean, processing information is something a computer can do. So really, you're really good at doing that, and you're an A student. But I have a smartphone that can do the same thing, so I just carry that in my pocket. That's it. So I'll just Google that whenever I need that, rather than spend years studying it just in case. So yeah, fair play. But yeah, so what happens is, aside from those students, the other students, the bulk of the students, me being one of them, would get discouraged when it comes to intelligent stuff. And so like me picking up a book, it took me a long time to get back into reading because I thought that whenever I didn't understand a concept, it was completely beyond me. Instead of learning that, put up with that frustration, keep turning the pages, and you'll get stuff out of it. And it'll build up, and it builds your synaptic connections. Your brain is starting to put together a picture that you're not even aware of. And over time, just exposing yourself to this stuff, even though it feels like it's so above your head, you will eventually rise to that level. Whereas in school, you don't get that. You have that experience throughout every single year, and you never reach that eureka moment. Like if I was to ask you, okay, Alec, you understand inflation. You remember the day that clicked. Maybe not the day that clicked, but you could probably recall reading somewhere in a book and going, oh, wow. And you'd be able to name the book. You might even be able to name the page. Now, if I was, of course you'd be able to name the author, and what the feeling came with. I mean, you built the memory. Now, if I was to ask you, at what point in public school or even private school, no, not all private. There's some good private schools. Of course, there's some good public schools. It depends on the teacher, really. But for the most part, could you point out a day that you learned something in public school that just went, oh wow, that's amazing. That's become a part of my psyche. Now I'm going to process the world with that. And I couldn't think of a single.
Not in a good way, certainly.
That's right. So it's funny. I actually asked my sister. We were having this conversation, and I asked my sister, the same thing. I said, did you recall any time in school when something just really, really hit home? And she was, I was doing my typical condescending voice, kind of really stirring it. And so because she normally would agree and she'd be listening to me, and she wouldn't really want to challenge me because we're having a friendly conversation. And so I put on this condescending voice, trying to draw it out a little bit. So she was looking for stuff. She wanted to prove me wrong. And so she went, yes, I have one. There was this one time in class when I couldn't do a sum or some kind of maths or whatever. And I said, this isn't how I do it. I have this other way of doing it. And she worked it out. And she asked the teacher, is it okay to do it this way? And the teacher says, oh, well, okay. And I said, okay, so the one time you could remember learning something was when the teacher let you do your own thing and not listen to their instruction. So what does that tell you? But
you think about it. Obviously we're speaking to an international audience here, but certainly in Irish schools, no child is taught philosophy. No child is taught correct economics. No child is taught critical reasoning or how to argue or how to make a point or, even to come up with fundamental kind of statements and then to kind of, break them down as you would, innately.
I know, and I actually, it's funny. I recall now there was one moment in primary school where there was we didn't have a subject designated for philosophy, but I remember our teacher, for some reason, we were all like 9, I guess, or something around that age, and she writes up on the board a quote from is it Descartes? I think, therefore I am. And you see, now I understand what he was talking about, but at the time I can remember this is what I remember from school: intense confusion, and this stuff stuck with me for the wrong reasons. Because I'm like constantly trying to process. Okay, we were just sitting in a room. I think we were playing with some mala, like plasticine type stuff. We were playing, and then all of a sudden she drops this like philosophical bomb, and I'm like, only now, and even now I'm still having trouble with it. I'm trying to think, what did Descartes actually mean when he said that, and what can I extrapolate from that? Really, that's what I remember, and I think that's like the solitary memory I have. Okay, yeah, well, I kind of had a caveat point. It's kind of like a cheat extra point here, just on that one. So the first one was you trust people who offer free education, but then the next part is you think that education is then actually free. So these schools are funded from your money still. It's still your money paying for it. It really isn't free. So basically what's happening is you have a bunch of money being taken out of your hands. So now you can't buy some kind of private education or some kind of... I'm not happy with... I've been looking at private curriculums and they really suck too. They're a little better because...
C plus 1 Pepsi equals 2 Pepsis.
Yeah, right, yeah. So there's that, but it's if we didn't have the government taking money for education, we would have money to pay for market education, which would be, and of course it wouldn't be something like thousands of kids shoveled into this big great building. You would have loads of smaller schools that each teach that cater to specific kids. But again, it comes down to the question: if you try, and you might try this, Alec. This has been my experience. You ask parents, okay, so why are you sending your kid to school? And you ask them, and when you do stuff, you should have a reason, right? You should have a fair, or at least one really good reason for doing something so profound as sending someone to school to put them in from a designated period to another designated period, where each subject is denoted by a bell, like this kind of training program. You have to ask to go to the bathroom as if you have any kind of control over your bladder. You have to wear a uniform. It's like, I'm not being funny and I'm not really exaggerating at all. That is absolutely the definition of prison. That's not really hyperbole. That is actually a direct comparison. Except in school, you don't have like Xboxes and PlayStations, and you can't study the subjects you want, like you can in prison.
Meals are free as well.
Yeah, right. Well, you're getting people to pay for your stay there, and what parents do is, they drive up at 9 o'clock in the morning or whatever time, and they let their little kid out and kiss him on the forehead, give him a packed lunch and a few books to carry in, and then it's like, all right, not my job anymore. I'm going out to work to pay the taxes that fund that school, rather than spending time with the kid myself and working less. Because if you were to remove that tax, and obviously you could remove, if you wanted, if someone preferred, they could remove those hours from their working day. And actually, so what is it that you want to send a kid to school for again? And the parent will go, well, to get an education. Okay, so to get an education in what? I say, well, maths and English and geography. And I say, okay, so what did you retain that you couldn't have done at home, or you couldn't have done just throughout your day, instead of teaching your kid fundamentals like logic and even, my kids come along, they're learning how to run a business at the age of 8. That's just a fact. They're going to want to be running businesses at that age, and they're going to have a good enough understanding of it. And I'm not just going to shovel them off somewhere unless I get a good reason between now and then. I really don't see it coming.
Yeah, exactly. You're dead right. They're conformity factories. They tend to dull the brightest minds as well. And we have to understand that we have, a parliament in this country full of teachers who aren't qualified to hold the offices they hold. So you kind of wonder, what are the teachers actually, in our schools? If all the good ones are politicians, well, what are the ones left in school? Like.
Okay, I'll move on to number 16. You think hoarding money is bad because you remove it from circulation. This is a remarkable misunderstanding, and it basically defines the Keynesian school and a lot of, well, not defines it. There's a lot that defines that school. But so the understanding is, okay, you get these greedy capitalists who take tons and tons of money out of circulation, and so there isn't any left for the poor people to pay for stuff. And the basic fallacy here is that money, like any other good, actually, when it becomes more scarce, it increases in value. So if somebody takes half the money out of circulation and buries it under a rock somewhere because they're nuts, and they're not saving it for investment or anything like that, they just literally, all they want to do is take money and store it because they're hoarders. What they've just done is they've increased the value of the stock of money that you hold in your wallet or in your bank account by 2. They've just doubled you haven't done anything, and all of a sudden your money's worth more because there's less of it in circulation. Now, aside from the fact that that's the extreme example, then there's the other example, which is simply people don't want to spend money. Wise business people don't want to spend money when it's a bad time to invest. Right now is a bad time to invest, and so keeping it out of circulation stops dumb projects that are never going to get finished from starting in the first place, and they're saving it until they see a good investment.
Yeah, with hoarding, it's funny. The only people who will tell you that hoarding money is bad is actually the government. And in some cases, certainly in the early 20th century in America, an administration there actually made it illegal. Because the problem with hoarding is, until deposit interest retention tax like we have here came in, they can't tax the money if it's not flowing through the economy. Even though you're increasing everybody else's wealth by hoarding it, that's a bad thing, because it's not as easily taxable as money free flowing through the economy would be. During the boom, which governments create through the business cycle, we had negative savings rates in the US. Here now in Ireland, we have a savings rate of 12%. People are in essence, in a small way, hoarding money, and of course that's a bad thing. These geniuses forget that saving is actually what forms the capital base, which allows investment, which allows an economy to grow. They seem to forget this. This is where saving comes from. We got lost in this cheap credit that was flowing into this country and to other countries, from everywhere, and this is what created growth. No, it didn't. It created artificial growth. Savings is what creates the capital base.
Well, that's the problem when people face they look at the economic numbers. It's absolutely fantastic. We had the biggest crash in history, and you look at the numbers, it's absolutely brilliant. If these theories are correct, that spending is wonderful, and we've never seen a bigger crash in the historical record.
To take it on from your point, if we think about it in very simple terms, right? If every piece of money in the world in a fiat currency like we have with the euro and with the dollar at the moment, if it's backed by nothing, that money is actually debt, right? So if the government's in debt, How does the government get out of debt if they can't tax people further? They do that by destroying the debt. How do you destroy the debt? Well, you make people's money worthless.
Right, and then they don't have to pay it back. Right, well, that's the purpose of legal tender laws. It's an incredible trick. I mean, again, it would be like, I couldn't imagine any business like Tesco coming along and saying, "Hey, you have to buy your products from us no matter what, and if you don't, you go to prison." What would that tell you about their products? Well, it would tell you that you wouldn't do it voluntarily. You wouldn't buy their products voluntarily, which means that their products suck. And so that's pretty much what they're saying when you say you have to take our money as payment. Well, it means your money sucks. It means nobody would use your money. They would use actual valuable money, but you can't do that because even though, and here's a crazy thing, if I wanted to start my own currency tomorrow and call it Gareth's or counterintuitions or fractionally reserveds or whatever, and try and circulate that, I'd get done for counterfeiting, even though it's not called a euro, and I wouldn't be duplicating euros. I mean, I would. The point would be to get away from euros. I would have nothing to do with them, but I would still be done for counterfeiting, which means faking and forging currency.
Yes, you would be, even though the people who'd be prosecuting you are the only legal counterfeiters on the planet.
Well, that's it. Nobody else can counterfeit except for them. So that's, I guess we can get to the heart of it that way. Okay, number 15. You think that morality is subjective and is invented rather than discovered. And this is kind of manifest when you see people protesting the initiation of new laws or the repeal of old ones, that are completely irrational. Like, we talked recently about the whole abortion thing.
Yeah.
People, protesting somebody writing on paper is really not a wise thing. I don't think it's a wise thing to do, at least, because what are you really doing? And what I see happening is, like, law can't stop stuff from happening. Law can certainly curb stuff. It can discourage people who are kind of straddling the fence or whatever and aren't too sure. Like, some people are debating, should I get an abortion or not? And a law could certainly sway somebody away that way, but it's not going to stop the problem of abortion. Making laws against speeding on roads does not stop speeding. Making laws against drinking and driving does not stop drinking and driving. So these are not solutions.
Yes.
These are things that, they'll stop certain people on the fence, but for the majority of the cases, you are not going to see a decrease. And we haven't seen a decrease. If you look at the introduction of these laws over the previous decades, and you correlate it with, and taking into consideration adjusting for population growth or shrinkage or whatever, you can do that. And you will still see that after the introduction of these laws, you are left with a far worse situation. And the reason for that is that it's not that people are lacking a law when they drink and drive. It's that they are lacking basic understanding or respect for themselves or for people on the roads. I mean, I'm familiar with certain people who after a pint or two are actually better drivers. Now, that's a decision that they can make. The problem is not that you're drinking and driving. The problem is that you're being dangerous on the road. Now, if somebody can drink and not be dangerous on the road, then that's obviously not a problem. So that's something that they would have to determine. But that's something that would be determined between them. Of course, their insurance company. Their insurance company could incentivize things for, and this is how it works in the market. It's like now, we don't say it should be illegal to run out in the street and start throwing hammers at random people. We don't need to make a law for that because we have all this other stuff that we have in the marketplace to keep us occupied without us going throwing hammers at people. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Like, making a law against drinking and driving doesn't make sense because the market can solve that in 2 seconds. If it's a real problem, people in the market rise up and say, okay, how do we fix it? Okay, so again, insurance companies who have the most to lose if somebody crashes their car, which is the thing that you can correlate most with drunk driving, they would just say, okay, voluntarily install a breathalyzer in your car and we'll give you, half price insurance or whatever. And they can do that. And of course, now it just makes perfect economic sense to not do that stupid stuff. If it's stupid, if it's not stupid, doesn't matter. So a law is, all a law does is it guarantees that the action it doesn't guarantee the action will continue, but the action will continue anyway because you're not getting at the root of the cause of why bad stuff happens. It's not for lack of laws. Laws are only there to prosecute after the bad stuff has happened and serve as a slight discouragement ahead of time. But crimes don't happen rationally. It's not like somebody goes through the list of laws and goes, oh, this is illegal, I better not do this, I better not murder this person, who because I'm absolutely rational right now, and I'm just going to say, oh wow, why did I think I should murder you? Why can't we just sit down and have a coffee instead because it's illegal? I mean, it's obviously that is not it's a lack of creativity, and it's something that happens. I think people learn it. This is one of the things that you acquire in free education. That you learn that the government's laws are the solution to everything. In the same way you learn that if somebody's bullying you in the schoolyard, you need to go to the teacher and tell them, and then the teacher makes a fool of you in front of everybody. No, somebody's bullying you in school, you punch them square in the jaw and you'll be done with it. And if they continue, you talk to your parents. So morality is not subjective. It is absolute. It is something that's universal. It's not okay to kill people, because by killing somebody you would be making a claim that it's okay to kill you, and nobody would make that claim. I mean, there are people out there who are probably nuts that you could say that. But it's not morality is not something that you can just put into law. You can't just make laws. You can't just take them away. Laws can only respect existing conditions. They can only respect, like saying, putting into law, we do not murder people in this territory. That makes sense, because we don't. That's something that we don't desire. And so the law is just there. If anybody's coming in and let's say in your country it's okay to murder people, well, have a look at this book here, because right here we don't do that. And it's there to help you.
Yeah, I mean, it's laws in essence can only alter people's preferences in the market, if you wish. They can only say, well, I would prefer to go around speeding or prefer to go around drinking and driving, but the punishment is X. And if the punishment is more severe than X, well, then I'm not going to do that. But that's the problem. The laws really are a punishment rather than an incentive. Like you get the example of the insurance company. The free market always seems to come up with an incentive, to get people to do things a certain way, whereas the government, when they produce laws in terms of, their morality that we have sanctioned, to give them morality, that they always use a punishment. I mean, and if we get back to morality, I mean, you mentioned the recent abortion debates. I mean, we had Lucinda Crichton being kicked out of the ruling party because she had a vote of conscience, as if this was the first time a politician ever voted with her conscience. It doesn't make any sense. Every vote should be a vote of conscience.
That's right, and so you end up with all kinds of crazier laws that that of course we can all agree with, murder and theft and this kind of basic understanding stuff. But then you get stuff like it's illegal to use drugs in your own home. It's illegal to sell them to people voluntarily. I mean, I'm no fan of drugs. I don't like them, personally. But there's a difference between a personal distaste and having the ability to tell other people. And actually, I saw this really funny picture online one time. It was one of those memes where it was basically this kid was getting pulled over by a cop, and I think he had a joint in his hand. And the cop's like, "Drugs are going to ruin your life, so I'm going to lock you up in prison and ruin your life." It's like, wait, did we forget what it was about? And of course we know what it's about. It's nothing to do with protecting people, and it's all about maintaining control of the supply of drugs, because hospitals can sell heroin. I mean, okay, we call it morphine. It's heroin. They can sell heroin. They sell that stuff, and they can sell it for big money. And if you were to ask drug dealers on the black market, what would be the one thing that would absolutely cripple your business as a black market drug dealer? And it would be that you would make drugs legal, and then businesses could actually sell it. They would be accountable if it kills somebody. Like people on the black market, what's going to happen? You're going to go to court and say, "Hey, I bought this tablet from this guy on this dark alley, and it ended up making me vomit. And 2 weeks later, I woke up in the Caribbean somewhere, and all my money was gone." The court, you would probably go to prison for buying this stuff. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It's and caffeine and tobacco, if they were classed today, they'd be classed in, well, not tobacco, but caffeine would be classed certainly up there with weed, anyway, whatever categorization that is, that C categorization. I don't remember. I'm kind of out of touch with all this stuff, because like I said, I mean, I don't condone the use of drugs at all. But if somebody wants to do it in their own home, or for me to even have to say that is so ridiculous. I mean, if you want to watch a movie in your own home, if you want to hang out with your family in your own home, I mean, obviously, it's just if you're not hurting anybody, then I have no grounds for telling you what to do. I mean, it's a no-brainer. So, but we know it's again, it comes down to monopolizing the supply of drugs. Keeps guards in business, keeps courts in business, keeps prisons in business, and it certainly keeps pharmaceutical companies in business. So that's really what it comes down to. Cool. Okay, number 14. You make statements like, "We're in debt," or "Our banks have failed," even though you had absolutely no involvement whatsoever. This one's starting to tick me off a little bit, because I'm still hearing it, even though people in the same breath will say stuff like, "Those greedy bankers did this and that," and all this kind of stuff, and then they'll say like, we're in debt. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
How? I'm sorry. I thought you said it was wasn't it the banks did this? Why are we in debt again?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, to say we're in debt, like, I mean, when these bankers, were doing what they were doing, it wasn't we're flying, to Monaco next Sunday to our holiday home. No, it was the bankers were. I mean, we're taking home 194,000 a year as a politician. No, it wasn't. It was they were. There was them and there was us, and now it's we. Once we're in trouble, it's we. It's society again. Absolute nonsense. This money that was created out of nowhere, that just came in to the country, like it kind of came to the periphery in Europe from Germany, like, flood water flowing down a drain that was too small, and then it just backfired with raw sewage on the rest of us, and now we're in debt. Our banks, we've turned a corner. We all need to get back to work. We all need to play our bit, Team Ireland, all of this nonsense.
And I think it could be, I don't know if I'm not a psychologist or anything, but it might be some kind of way at wrestling back some kind of feeling of control, because it's like, okay, no matter what, here's what happens. Okay, if the banks hadn't failed, you would be being taxed the same money. Okay, they're taking that money from you one way or the other. That's already gone. Now to say you're in debt is to say that, we, instead of paying this money that we all had on all this fun stuff like hospitals and schools and all stuff that we're going to benefit from, we're now bailing out the banks. But we are not, because we were never going to spend that money on hospitals and schools. The government were going to spend that money on hospitals and schools and all that kind of stuff. And they were going to do a terrible job, like we know. I mean, we just need to look at every single industry that they're involved in, everything they say it's for. So they say stuff like, okay, we're going to take control of education because that's essential for society. So this is the whole purpose, is to educate people and make them smarter. Well, are people more educated and smarter than they were before government had this kind of control? Absolutely not. What about so the most recent example is the banks. We're going to make the financial system more stable. They took control of the banks in 2008. Are we in a more financially stable situation? Absolutely not. We're going to take control of healthcare because people need healthcare and we need to stabilize healthcare. We need everybody to be completely safe and secure and have this safety net. Is healthcare in such great shape that that the government promised it would once they took control? Absolutely not. Far worse. Okay, the post service. You compare the government postal service to private companies like DHL, which the post. I don't know if people are aware of this, but when you're dealing with UPS and DHL, these private postal companies who ship internationally, you have to pay huge custom taxes at the docks. I remember ordering in some products from China to sell, and it cost me about 80 euros to get it here. That was their shipping charge included. And when it got to customs, I got a notification saying, okay, we have your thing, but you have to pay 50 euros to get it released. Customs have determined that, it's 50 euros. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? You just stole a package belonging to me and now I have to pay another 50. Whereas had I gone with the government post service, I wouldn't have to pay a customs fee. So even with this completely unfair market advantage that the post service had, they still do an absolutely dreadful job where they can't even guarantee, they can't even guarantee within a week under certain plans just to get stuff as far as France. I mean, we're not talking far here. We're talking throw it on a ship or on a plane and get my package over there. You can't even do that for big money. They're dreadful. So literally every single thing that the government touches, like the opposite of Midas, they just touch stuff and it just falls to ash and is dreadful. So when we say stuff like getting cut off point 14, but the we're in debt or our banks have failed is absolutely not true, because they're not. It's not your debt and they were not your banks. That money is gone anyway. That's already gone. And so for you to say something like we're in debt is like to say, well, we could have not been in debt. Well, no, because that's gone. So,
I mean, let's just look at it in simple terms. If you imagine a country of 5 million people, and you just created a country out of nowhere, and you said to them that, right, for these 5 million people, we're going to spend 21 billion euro a year on social welfare. And at one stage, 1 in every 4 people who live in this country are going to be employed in construction. You would be tapping the government on the shoulder saying, this can only end pretty badly. I mean, you don't even have to throw in the banks. But it's our problem now,
And of course, what people mean by it too is that because how much do we really pay? Like if you're to say, if I turn to you and I say, Alec, man, I'm in debt. I got millions to pay. That would be a big deal for me. I would not want to claim that if it wasn't true. Okay, so if that wasn't true, I would say, wow, like it is true right now. I am not in debt. I'm happy to say that. Now, for me to say I'm in debt and I'm not, I would obviously have to have some kind of a good reason for it. And here's what I think it is when people say it. No, I don't know if this is an explicit understanding on people's part, but I think this is kind of an intuitive thing that people get. We're in debt. What they really mean is Ireland is in debt. I benefit from Ireland's government. So either I'm on some kind of welfare, or I trust the education system, I like the police service, all this kind of stuff. I believe that, okay, it's not perfect, but it's, I'm getting good stuff out of it. Now, we're in debt. What I'm really saying is this. We're all in debt. And I'm going to contribute a very, very small amount. But versus the rest of the country, look at what I'd be getting by claiming that we're all in debt. Because if we all pay into it, they got 5 million other people who are paying into it versus the little bit that I'm putting in. Like me personally, if I calculate how much of my tax went towards healthcare, I'm looking at about 10 grand last year. Now, did I get any healthcare for that? Absolutely not. So some old folks, benefited from that, or some folks who, we were crossing the street and got hit by a car or something, and they shouted the loudest in the hospital. They maybe got taken care of. You know what hospitals like, and that's where that money went. So aside from the fact that I'm acutely aware of the amount of money that's being burned in my name that I'm not going to have any access to in a few years' time after it's all gone, I think everybody who kind of sees the benefit of being part of the system, it has an interest in saying that we're all in debt, because then everybody's paying for that person. The quantity that they're benefiting from, the capital they have access to versus the capital they're putting in is far greater.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the more worrying that we live in a country where the government actually control the banks. I mean, we have state-owned means of production.
That's right. Okay, point 13, you conflate culture, arts and history with government. If you go overseas and somebody asks you, are you missing home or whatever, what are you missing? You're thinking Ireland, you're thinking Irish, you're thinking all the good stuff about Ireland. You're going to think of music, you're going to think of, the colourful history we have, and probably take some kind of pride in the fact that even though we personally had nothing to do with any kind of revolution or anything, we can at least identify, and some part of us lights up and goes, yeah, you know what, I'd love to, if I was given the opportunity, to throw off some oppressive, English dictator or whatever, that would be cool. I'd be on the front line or whatever. And the culture, just a nice kind of attitudes. Irish people, now, not all the time, but there's kind of this understanding that people know how to be sound. They know how to take care of each other. There isn't this real. We're kind of friendly. I mean, of all the places to do away with traffic lights, this would be the place. People are so nice about letting other people go and all this kind of thing. So this is Ireland, and then on the same. With the same word, you could say stuff like, well, Ireland puts troops overseas. Ireland is in debt. Ireland is Enda Kenny and these guys. And somehow this very, very small group of government people got themselves wrapped up with the word Ireland and what it means to be from this country.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was George Orwell who said it, they take our words and then they change the meaning of what the words actually are. When you see Enda Kenny on the front of Time magazine and talking about Ireland's economic recovery, or you hear about, the president Michael D. Higgins is patron of such and such an orchestra or the Arts Council or something like that. They basically, as you said, taken everything that's good about the country and labelled it in some way with the government, even the gathering. Like, they're actually taking responsibility for the people who for generations have had to leave this country because of the mess successive governments have made out of it, but now they're inviting them back and calling it the gathering. It's a government sanctioned thing that we're welcoming them home. They wouldn't have had to leave in the first place if it was doing its job.
Absolutely. And by doing its job, you mean not existing.
Yeah. By not being around in the first place.
Okay. Number 12. You think if you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain. This is a brilliant logical fallacy, and I think this kind of embodies the idea of the patriot. That the patriot is the person who does their civic duty. They go out and they sacrifice a couple hours in their day to have their voice heard. And of course, that's not what it's about. I mean, it's complete nonsense. It would just take just 2 seconds to dismantle the whole notion. I don't even think it's necessary to do here. Maybe I will. Maybe, but if you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain. Now, let me just challenge the basic premise behind the idea. If you don't do something, you don't have a right to complain about it. If you just try and apply that anywhere else and try and make sense of it, you can't quite do it, but you can do it in politics somehow. So I would say that if you do vote, you don't. And by complain, I mean, whoever gets in and their policies and all this kind of stuff. That's what people say. If you can't say, who I voted for was wrong if you didn't vote, or you can't say that, well, let's say that I voted for somebody and they got in. I would expect everybody else in that pool of voters to respect that, because those are the terms. That's the whole point of voting, is that you pick one person over a whole group of others, and that's to represent your opinion. So if this person gets in, I would expect everybody else to respect that and say, yeah, okay, this person got in fair and square. These were the terms of the vote. So you don't have a right to complain if you vote, really. If you don't vote, then you've exempted yourself from the terms of that and basically opted to abstain from the outside looking in very rationally and say, wow, you know what, I didn't take part in that craziness. Here's what's wrong with it. And they would say, well, you don't have a right to talk. So what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to just pick somebody randomly, vote for them, and then I can talk about it? I mean, what are you talking about?
I mean, I would go to say, I mean, in terms of not voting, I mean, I've probably said this before, but I've often wished that apart from the prescribed list of candidates in front of you, there should be another box you can tick saying none of the above. And I mean, that would show that you're not happy in this free democracy voting for a list of candidates that's already predetermined.
Well, absolutely, and I think we have something like that already. There is a large group of people who have ticked none of the above without actually showing out to tick. By not showing up, that's effectively what you're doing. And if you look at the previous the turnouts for the last few, we're not looking at majorities of the people, even the electorate. I mean, the electorate was okay. Maybe was it the last national election for the government was 52% of the electorate turned out, something like that. So you had just over the majority, but that's the majority of the electorate. So that's not including everybody under the age of 18 who this stuff actually affects, because we're all going to benefit from it now. Well, maybe not us, but people a little older than us get all the benefits of these stupid policies that these people put in. And it's the under 18-year-olds who pay for it. So of course they're not allowed to vote. But now but here's the key to it. I think what's really interesting is that you are allowed to vote. The age at which you're allowed to vote coincides almost identically to the age you complete your course of public schooling. so you basically have to run through your public schooling, brainwashing, and then you're qualified.
Yes, then you can come out and vote once you've finished your free education and free vote.
That's it. Okay, number 11. You feel genuine emotion and connection when you hear or sing the national anthem. Now, I want to be a little slower on this one because it is such an emotional issue, and it's something that I grew up with. Back in the day, you'd hear that song and you'd all kind of stop and you get excited. Just start a football game, start a soccer games, whatever, or GAA, and this national and in this one moment, you're all bypass the normal human relationships of getting to know each other, any kind of intimacy, any kind of understanding and common ground, and you're all united with this one song. And it's a really, really powerful thing. I mean, music is incredibly powerful for doing stuff like this. It can completely short circuit your normal rational approach to relationships, and all of a sudden you've got this massive group. I mean, this is stuff that people in war, soldiers sing their. I mean, this their national anthems were for that. They would all sing it together, and all of a sudden, all the little disagreements and quabbles they had, and anybody questioning their motivations and questioning the reasons why they're out there in the first place, that all evaporates in a moment, and you're part of this massive group of completely brilliant people, and you all love each other, and it's great. And of course, you mix in alcohol with that, and like at our football games or our GAA or whatever. Like the way I see sport is a way of particularly introducing youth to nationalism and to patriotism, because it's based on if you find it hard to stomach being patriotic to an Irish government, because when you see these guys, even just by looking at them, I mean, these are not people who, you can look at celebrities and go, wow, that guy takes care of himself. He's cool. He's disciplined. He's got, whatever. He's fit, or she's fit or whatever. These are healthy, exciting people who respect themselves. And then you look at politicians and they're all overweight, old, red-faced, gray hair, all nothing wrong with gray hair particularly. But when you combine all these elements together, you see these people who you can just know they're sitting around writing documents and quabbling about nonsense all day long and just consuming capital. And it's just these bellies are coming straight out. We're paying for those. It's disgusting, horrible people. So it's a lot more difficult to stomach being patriotic towards people like that. Whereas if you can juxtapose it onto sport, where you're going back to these fit, disciplined people who you can respect, these kind of warrior type, kind of modern warrior type, they're going to go out and kill the enemy. And you have this song that unites you. It's got like an introduction to patriotism. It's an introduction to, you were born here in Ireland. So you are to be, it's just by absolute coincidence, not because they're the best team or whatever. They just are the best team now because you happen to be born in Ireland, or you happen to be born in Munster or Leinster or wherever. And and this is, it's not based on any kind of merit. It's not based on any. No, there are. I'm not saying that sport isn't based on merit, but I'm saying this part of it, this element where you introduce the national anthem, everyone gets united together, and you're yelling for your warriors to go and represent your home, your tribe. But it's not really a tribe because it's just you don't know each other. I mean, anyway.
Yeah, there is a complete disconnect there. I mean, I think that was clearly seen where we had the so-called British and Irish Lions rugby squad turn Australia, and we saw thousands of people follow them down under in their recent games. But I mean, how could you have a sense of collective consciousness when you have teams from Ireland, Scotland, England and Wales who before each other's matches, the same season in the Six Nations would be fervently singing their own national anthems and beat the hell out of those other guys, when this is a purely corporate machine, but yet we're supposed to feel some kind of affinity towards this unit that corporatism has created. It's getting worse because it's actually like a superstructure. It's like Europe in the Ryder Cup, cheer on the European boys.